I'm not used to running this meeting, so I'm a little. Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to our monthly English faculty meeting. Oh, yay, there's Nicole. It's lovely to see you all as always. So I have the notes open, our big running notes document. So if there's anything that you would like to add, we don't really have like an agenda for today, unless it got added. Nope, we don't. And so if there's anything you'd really like to discuss, please, please, or pop it in the chat and I can add it into the notes. I have your assessment report done. And so I have, I did, so you can absolutely have the reports. I'm going to submit those to the JOT form as soon as this meeting is done. I discovered that I forgot to submit our Composition 2 JOT form. So I've got that. I'm going to submit that today too. Anyone who would like a copy of the full report, please let me know. And I would love to send that to you. I can send you the PDF of the JOT that I submit, or I have it in like a Word doc. That's all the same thing. And I also, what I'm going to show you guys today, I visualized all of the different, results that we got so that we could just because that helps when we're thinking about, how did this go? Rather than just the numbers. And if you would like that, that is linked in our notes for today. That's at the very, very bottom, 2022 Comp 1 Assessment Report Visuals. So I would love to talk about that. But is there anything we want to start with? Anybody got some like Friday morning good news they want to share with us? You know me, I love good news at the top of a meeting.
It's not snowing up here in Tahoe. That's good.
I'm
happy about that.
That is good news. That is good news. So I was born in Alaska, but I was born in a part of Alaska that rains more than snows. And I always thought, like, I love the winter. I love the winter weather. No, you know what? I like cold and rainy, not cold and snowy, it turns out. I'm specific about the precipitation that I like.
I'm a little shocked that it rains instead of snows anywhere in Alaska.
Oh, yeah, no, Southeast Alaska, Juneau, very, very rainy. It actually qualifies as a rainforest. That's how much rain it gets.
That's wild.
Yeah. And I like that apparently. And I learned this winter, no, not so much. Okay, well, if it's okay with you guys, I'll dive into my assessment discussion, and maybe that'll inspire us to talk about some other stuff. So first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone here who helped complete the reads. And for those of you out in TV land who also helped with that, thank you so much. That was awesome. We needed 8 readers plus me, and we got 8 readers plus me. So that was very, very exciting. And thank you all so much for that, because I served as the 3rd reader, so I didn't like not read anything. I promise. I read a lot, because we had a lot of 3rd reads, but we know where they came from, which is exciting, because I have that information. So I will open up so that we can look at these results. And let me share screen with you guys. Like I said, this is linked in the document. So this year we had spring 2022 and fall 2022. So that's why it's the 2022 Composition 1 total. Whereas for our Composition 2, that will run on the academic year. Composition 1 is running on the calendar year. So it's kind of cool how we have that staggered now. I like it. So this is the totals overall. In the 3 different areas. So area 1 was quality of sources, area 2 was integration of sources, and area 3 was citation. Blue is met on this chart and orange is unmet. So as you can see, we beat threshold, which is 50% in all 3 areas. We hit target in area 1 really easily, by the way. Quality of sources was our area that had the fewest 3rd reads. We were pretty much universal in how we viewed the quality of the sources. So we are like all very much on the same page there, and our students are using good sources. So it was good news all the way around. So both we agree on what good sources are and they're using them.
Exactly. That's good to hear, because I know that was the huge point of discussion and almost like a dissertation last time that
It
we
was.
So it's good to hear that it actually went all right.
Yeah, it was. That was the area I was concerned about exactly after that conversation. And so I'm excited to see that while we as academics were very passionate and had a lot of nuance in that conversation, students are just taking away the high points. So that's great. And we almost got to target in area 3 citations. So very strong in citation. Citations were largely present, which is fantastic. Our weakest area, which still over 60% is not weak, but our weakest area was integration of sources. And I will say that's also where the majority of third reads occurred. So if we're looking next year at, hey, how do we turn these assessment results into something really meaningful? I think that a place for growth is looking at, hey, how are we teaching integration of sources? What are our guidelines for that? What do we want to see? And how are we communicating that to our students, and how are we giving them opportunities to practice? But we're solid across the board, threshold all the way across the board. And then, so I broke these numbers out. So in this chart, spring is blue and fall is orange. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to change the color of an individual chart. And so it's going to get a little confusing because they're all the same color, but they don't all mean the same thing. And I'm sorry, I'm going to work on it. I might have to take a class from Jana or something. So if we just look at these first three, these are the MET numbers. We can see that there's some variation. In the fall, we performed stronger in both quality of sources and citation, and we were right about the same spot for integration of sources. But then the performance was like a little different in spring, a little lower in spring in quality and citation, and then a little higher in integration of sources. Spring is a really small sample, so I mean it's hard to know, but the big takeaway for me here is that we're above threshold across the board, and in every instance, not just like a tiny bit above threshold, we're well above threshold, and sort of moving in that right direction. So good job there. And then, so if we want to look at overall in person versus online, how did folks perform? And we can see, online is performing really, really strongly. So that narrative we used to hear, right, that online learners can't perform at the same level of achievement as in-person learners, well, that's not true anymore. And the reason that's not true is because of the hard work that we're all doing. So yay, it's working, it's paying off. We are, I mean, in quality of sources, bam, through the roof, 80%, that's amazing. So we're doing really well, and we don't see, I mean, still we're not seeing any anomalous numbers. We're not seeing anything that is making me go like, hey, what happened here? Everything is pretty consistent, and again, pretty consistently area 2 is our lowest area. So and then, because this is very near and dear to my heart, and all of those of us teaching English 100, how are English 100 students performing compared to their peers? And very well. I'm really, really excited. If we're talking about, what was it, Mary, like 5 years ago when you started attending those meetings?
No, that was a long time ago. Yeah, I haven't been teaching English 100. But I taught last year, but then this year I haven't taught any, so I don't know. It was definitely like not the most fun.
Yeah. It's a challenging class, and it's been really challenging for sure to put together, but our hard work has paid off. Our English 100 students represented in blue here are performing really, really well. comparably and even maybe a little above our English 101 students, which says to me, right, that extra support that we're providing in 100 is really, really working, which is fantastic. And then we have this one, which is something that we want to look at, right, when we're talking about, okay, what areas can we develop? And we see that this is the one spot where we do have kind of an anomalous number as far as I'm concerned, and that is in area 1. That performance is still at threshold, so that's still great, but it is significantly different than what we're seeing in other groups and compared to sort of the general overall numbers. And so this suggests that there is, I think, an opportunity to continue having that conversation that we were having last time about what do we mean when we're talking about quality of sources? How do we establish the credibility of a source? Is it just credentialism, or do we have other checks that we're using? And as always, I'm just going to be in favor of the CRAP test because it's fun to say and it's easy to remember. So again, I think as we sort of see every year, our adjuncts need support. This is challenging stuff. The conversation last time revealed is a challenging landscape. And especially when we sometimes have adjuncts from outside of an English discipline teaching Composition 1, I think it's important for us to be just really, really clear when we're talking about quality of sources, how we're establishing that quality. And then if anybody was curious, dual enrollment versus the general population, we did have a dip last year in dual enrollment. Dual enrollment performed not quite as well as general population, and not quite as well as they had in other years. And this year they bounced back. So though again, as always, we see that integration of sources is kind of our sore spot. So and then on the rest of this, I've broken down spring and fall in exactly those same ways. So if you're interested, there's a lot of information here. As well as the full report that, again, I'm happy to share, that has actually the raw numbers. If you're wondering, we had 88 total artifacts that we pulled from. And so 66 from the fall and 22 from spring of 22. So any questions? Any comments? What do you guys think? Are you proud of yourself? You should be so proud.
I'm just curious, do you know how many third reads there were? You said that there were a handful, but I'm just curious.
I do. Yeah, let me pull up that document. I thought I had it up here. There were a lot. It was pretty significant this year. And so I think there's an opportunity there as well. Maybe we need to have more of a norming conversation, or I think actually kind of like a series of norming conversations across the semester. You know, we're like at all of our meetings, we're kind of touching on this conversation, like sources and all that good stuff. So here, let me find, yeah, there we go. Third read. There you go. Okay, so yeah, so for area 1 out of the 88 essays, only 13 required a third read. So very, very low. That's great. Area 2 was 28 and area 3 was 25. Now we did have in that was like 2 readers were pretty far apart in one batch. And so that did kind of like bump that number because there was one group where there was like like the 2 readers just had a different interpretation of 2 and 3, or were just kind of like, I don't know, it just came to different conclusions. So that one group had like a little bit more, but yeah, area 2 was our highest area, followed by area 3. And there were many. There were quite a few. Yeah, but that's great. That tells me good information, right? That tells me that 1, I don't think a single like marathon norming session is actually the best approach. To me, I think having this conversation over the course of the semester is just going to result in a better, I know it'll result in a better understanding for me personally. I'm kind of a slow processor. I get down pretty far, but it takes me time to process what the conversation is really about. And so for me, I would love to just extend our norming conversation so that we're hitting on it throughout the semester. I think is what I learned there. If anyone would like me to share their individual data, I can do that as well. And I'll visualize it for you, pre-tenure people, if you want to say, be able to include a chart in your portfolio that shows your performance compared to the performance of the general population. Could be.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would. I think it's interesting to me. Yeah. So
yeah, awesome. So email me and I will put that together for you, and then we can do that.
Yeah.
Jerry, just moving forward and talking about some of the topics that have popped up here, which are, citation and choosing sources and that kind of thing. I'm thinking that maybe the library, I know that we've been short-staffed, but I think the library here has a lot to offer, and I think we've been a little bit underutilized. I know Nicole has some big plans. We're hoping to hire a new staff member soon, which will free her up to offer some support and some outreach to faculty to come to class, to talk about resources, to talk about the quality of resources, talk about searching techniques, all of those exciting pieces that are information literacy that libraries live for. We would be more than happy to come to classes, to come to your classrooms and present on certainly the resources that we have in the library. But also, I would love to be involved with the general conversation of information literacy. I think we as librarians have a lot to offer there, and we'd be absolutely delighted to share what we can. So I'm really delighted to see the great results you've got there, but I would love to be able to also be part of future successes.
Yes. We would love so much that. And also a request that we've had is if we could get a video of that awesome presentation that you guys do about how to use the library resources and just breaking down all of those different things, that would be so incredible. That would be such a powerful piece of support that I know we would all love to take advantage of. Thank you so
especially
much.
because like having an online class, it's harder to require students to come to campus to the library. So having the sort of digital things is excellent. And I love Niche Academy, by the way, for Nicole. I have checked it out and everything. And so that is something that I'm really happy that you guys have been providing in terms of that digital like video format of things. So for sure.
Yeah, we could certainly put that, Nicole, let's put that on our summer to-do list.
It is on my summer to-do list, and I love that because I definitely want to do that. Also, just so anybody wants, if you are doing a Zoom meeting, I am more than happy to do a virtual walkthrough. I can share my screen. We can do those things. I can also do the individual meetings that I offer for students in person. I can do those virtually as well, or even over the phone. So definitely don't let the distance stop anybody. I'd love to help.
A paragraph advertising that? Could you send us like a thing that we could forward with like your email and contact so that I could like, because I have students who are starting to write research papers right now, and they would love an individual meeting with you, I bet. And if I could just like email them like, hey, this super cool person would make your life easier.
Well, one of the things that I discovered a few years back was that there was a real correlation between time spent individually one-on-one with a librarian and the quality of the research that resulted in that, and then as a result of that, the quality of the writing. So by all means, please encourage your students to come meet with us one-on-one, and we shall definitely put something together real fast that we can share with all of you with all those contact details.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you. Well, thank you. Yeah. If you could just send me like a little blurb that I could like, I'll just email them. Perfect. Yay. Hey, I have a note. I warned Jess I might not be able to take notes, but I have a note. I have a great note. I'm excited. All right. Wonderful. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other? I was really interested in integration of sources and how that both with like performs like the lower levels of achievement and also just like a lot of third reads. I was kind of interested in that. But you know, I like assessment. I like it.
Something, just a note from me as far as me, what I've seen in the library, I've noticed that quite a number of students write their paper and then try to fit the source. And so I think that that is impacting your integration of sources because they're finding the source afterwards to fit their paper. And so, and that's something that when it comes up, we have a conversation, you know, about how outlining and things like that and that kind of stuff. But that might be part of what you're seeing.
That is really interesting. Because I know I work really hard to try to avoid that. Because yeah, that fill-in thing would absolutely result in the kind of thing that we were seeing, which was very much like there would be like a signal phrase and then a quote, but then nothing after the quote that would explain why the quote was there. There'd be like a paragraph talking about stuff and then a signal phrase and a quote and then just the end of the paragraph. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, if there's ever a requirement for a number of sources in a paper, we will oftentimes see students come in and say, I just need one more citation. I just need one, just give me something. And all they want is a title and an author, and they'll look for a sentence in the book and they'll plug it in. And that way they meet their required number of sources. So yeah, we as Nicole says, we have conversations about that and try to discourage it, but in the end, it's their paper.
Yeah. And yet, like, sorry, I was just trying to think like, well, how do we get around from requiring a number of sources? But then if I don't do that, I'll get no sources.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like I do a lot of process work, and I know that all of us do, you know, kind of pacing that and making sure we have our sources first before we even start writing. At least I assume most people are doing that. I mean, I call it pre-writing rather than an outline, because I think having them go do their research component first before writing the paper is a good thing. However, I've noticed I discovered analogy for what's happening for what I see of I have all this process work directing them to this natural conclusion of the paper. And it's a bit like whenever I first started to drive, the way that, you know, sometimes parking spots are angled. For whatever reason, I would complicate it and I would go in the opposite direction and just make it harder on myself. I just didn't realize the whole angled parking spot is directing you to pull out in a specific direction and go with traffic. Anyway, all of which to say, I think it's a bit like that, or it's like kids writing their J's backwards or something, you know, it's like, I don't know. That's my philosophical analogy for, I think, what a lot of that, whenever a lot of that happens. But I think Claire has something to say. I don't know.
So I was just going to say, I like the expression hit and run quotation, which comes from that I say, they say book.
Yeah.
I liked how they explained that, where you just kind of drop a quotation on somebody and you like run off, you know, and you don't do anything with it. Yeah, research question, I think, you know, teaching the research question. I don't do a lot to force them to use a research question, but I spend a lot of time talking about the benefit of using research that way to answer a question that you really want to answer. And so that to me is a big difference between people that are just going out and cherry picking things for their confirmation biases and people that are looking at research as an act of exploration and discovery.
I love teaching the integration of quotes. Kind of easier in person, but the value of just of first setting up the quote and aiming the reader's focus at something that you find valuable and unpacking it. Like they get it after a while, but so often students just sort of leave it to you to infer the connections between things.
Yeah. It's actually, I really like, that's when I teach analysis, I'm like, this is the part where you explain your argument. Don't skip this part. It's one of the things that I enjoy digging into with
Well-
students, but they're so resistant. They just kind of want to leave it there and say like, no, you understand. You get it. It's fine.
Well,
they've
here's
been
my shocking
conditioned that way, yeah.
Yeah. Here's my shocking thing, Josh. So because I have a huge Jumpstart population, and it's because I think they're told that's how they need to do quick essays, like in testing environments, is to, if they have that, sort of passage that they need to quote, they quote it, and then they keep on talking about whatever they're talking about. And it's because they told me, the students have told me, they're like, no, our teacher just assumed that the reader is going to understand the information
Yeah.
that you're incorporating. They've told me that directly, and I'm like, oh, I think I know why. It's because of it, maybe a different testing environment or something else. They've been told that in high school, at least currently. So I don't know. That's at least my take on it.
Well, but
Yeah.
that, we explicitly need to make sure they hear that
No,
opposite message.
exactly. Yeah, no, I explicitly engage with that for sure. I'm like, no. Do not assume your reader's stupid. I'm like, assume them that they don't understand this complex language, this jargon. Do you understand that jargon? No, you need to explain it. So sorry, I'm monopolizing a lot of this conversation.
It's interesting you say it because I had my Jumpstart students tell me that they were told not to read, that they're just supposed to skim. And I'm like, who told you not to read? Who would say that to you? And it's because, there's this like assumption like, oh, in college, you're going to be assigned. I think this is my interpretation. You're going to be assigned a lot of reading. And so you're not going to be able to get through all of it. So you have to learn how to skim. And I'm like, wouldn't a teacher's time be better spent teaching a student how to read deeply than teaching them how to read the first sentence of every paragraph and figure
Well,
it out? I was like, you were told not to read? How is
The
that?
sad thing is they're only reading excerpts. They don't read like full novels anymore. All the textbooks are excerpts of things. And this has been going on for about 10 plus years now, but
I was
that too.
thinking about that, just teaching like a Victorian poem now. You can tell they're like, this is too long. Like, oh my God.
Exactly. I was like, I couldn't do Rime of the Ancient Mariner because it was too long. I was like, oh my God.
Well, and
I
I
was-
specifically make my readings pretty short because I know that they, have trouble with the longer stuff. So my readings are all really quite short. I mean, and in my, I don't tell them this, but like in my mind, I'm like, I want my readings to be short enough that they could read them in 20 minutes before class, that they could completely forget about them and just read them right before, or during the free writing thing I do at the beginning of class, sometimes they can just read them then, instead of free, but.
So I actually do reading together in class at every opportunity. I cannot talk highly enough about reading fiction in class together. Just like 100% of a story together, out loud. I love to do dramatic reading, and there's really good evidence that my deep passion for performance is actually helping my students. So since I don't have a stage, I will read dramatically to my students, and that actually promotes learning and understanding. And I find that to be like such an engaging, because I would get so frustrated when they didn't like, how can we have this conversation? But so in my composition 1 though, I teach different kinds of reading for different needs. So like for a scientific paper, there are absolutely parts of that I will tell them to skim.
Yeah.
But there are parts that I'm like, no, you must read every sentence of the introduction and make sure you understand it. You can skim methodology unless you're going to reproduce this study.
Yeah.
But like this, you must read the conversation, right? What are they saying about? But that's really interesting that there's also this like, how are you going to get away with that in philosophy? You're gonna skim Derrida? Can you imagine reading just the first and last sentence of a paragraph of Derrida, and then just your brain would just like fall out of your head?
Okay.
This triggers something I was supposed to. Angie emailed me and said, reminded me to tell everyone about that she's still interested in doing a literacy survey and getting ideas for the questions from everyone. That's one thing she was interested in, and it's her husband's birthday today, so she actually had to go do something fun for him. And then the other thing, and you talking about science writing triggered that memory, is that I think it's really cool that we're expanding our notions of what 102 can be. I think it's appropriate. And not that literature can't be used, but it's one of a range of things. So I find that really appealing. I mean, right now my 102 is geared towards literature, but philosophically, I believe in that more varied approach. And I think it's much easier for our students if they have something they can latch onto. I was talking to a history teacher the other day, and it was talking about the difficulty of getting students to read difficult texts, because you pull something out and and students just are, a lot of his students just flat unwilling to engage with a difficult, archaic piece of writing. They're just, they just sort of throw up their hands. And so it slows down, shares a piece of the writing in class. And so they actually start to build the muscles they lose that fear about engaging with it. And I thought that was really interesting and for us to think about, as we interact with other disciplines, how we can encourage them to work with students and maybe slow down giving time for some of these things, because I mean, the reality is students are just not as equipped in years past to engage, and they don't have the habit of it. And so a few moments spent devoting time as a group to something can achieve an awful lot. But I guess it does feel like you're dumbing down something, but spoon feeding, but if
But we
but
teach
you got to.
classes. Like
Yeah.
we teach introductory classes. And I
Yeah.
think, I don't think it is dumbing down. I think it's meeting our students where they are. And I will say, I wish so much that I had this kind of support when I was a student at WNC, because I was really great at reading literature. I had to learn how to read in the sciences, and it took me years to understand that was a totally different kind of reading. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it is so worthwhile for faculty in those fields to actually slow it down and help students through that material. When it's important. If it's important enough that you really need students to know how to do that in order to succeed, well, hey, we're in 100 level classes. We're introducing stuff. This is the perfect time to introduce. I love that so much. Thank you, Josh.
Well, and I don't think that teachers, I don't think they don't feel like they have permission to do that. It almost seems like, shit, I'm watering this down or whatever, but you're making your students stronger so they can do the difficult things that you're asking them to do. But I was shocked at how few of the students were, if given something difficult, they would just not do it. That's it. And you realize, oh, well, you got to scaffold that. You better slow down, make them feel confident, because it seems too daunting, apparently. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is, one of the major types of procrastination, right?
Well, I'll say something that it really kind of reevaluated how I was approaching it, because I felt the same way, Josh. I was like, I was definitely spoon feeding, watering down content, because we're reading Frankenstein right now in my 102 class, and I have these worksheets that I designed. I was really happy about it. The first page of the worksheet always is just locating quotes. So oftentimes I'll pull a quote, and it's in chronological order, and I'll either pull a quote and they have to go identify the page, or I'm going to identify the page and talk about what is happening there, and they have to go find a relevant quote for it. And Scott came in and observed did my classroom observation, and he noticed, he was like, because that was the first activity that I did whenever we transitioned into talking about the book, because I had like a whole grammar lesson, then we did that. And he identified, he was like, no, it was really good that you did like easy entry level stuff that anybody can do. He's like, that's the equivalent of me asking them to do like a quadratic equation and then moving on and then going into the deeper discussion that's like philosophically what's happening or other sort of contextual stuff. And I, at first, again, Josh, I thought I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just doing such a bad job of just like watering this down, like go find the page this occurs on. But I knew that my quiz, for instance, on the overall text later is going to require them to integrate sources in the sense of they need to have a quote with a citation on a short essay for their quiz. So this is already prepping them to do that. And I've already explained that multiple times to them, but having Scott say like having an entry level thing the way that he does for his math was really kind of nice, having cross discipline, pointing out that.
Can I add one thing from an educational like perspective? You're also helping them build that neural pathway by forcing them to go back into the text in a physical way to locate these specific things in chronological order. That will actually help them cement the content of that story. I mean, like that's good educational practice. That's not in any way watering down. You're not spoon feeding. You're helping students build the basic foundational skills that they need and giving them extra support in the cognitive function that will help them succeed later on. I think that's great educational practice.
Well, good. That's good to hear, because initially I was like, oh boy, this is bad.
And what was it that you opened with again? It was
whenever I open class, I open with a grammar instruction, and
the grammar instruction.
I do it through the lens of pop music. So this past week I did, actually when Scott came in, it was Katy Perry's Hot and Cold, and I used it to talk about parallelism and parallel structure. This week I talked about the different forms of you, like how you can have an indefinite rhetorical you and all the different spellings of you, of course, with Gautier, somebody that I used to know. It's always random songs. Oh, my cat's coming over here. Yeah, anyway, I really do like the grammar stuff. And that was inspired by a K through 12 thing with another teacher who did what she called Grammar Beat. And I just took her idea and just kind of made it my own. But yeah, it's a good time. Yeah. But I only get that for my in-person instruction. I've been trying to figure out a good cohesive way to integrate that in the online sphere. And it's difficult because part of the problem with grammar is that sometimes it's nuanced. Like, obviously you can always say like a comma goes here and it doesn't. I get that. But like, when do you add an exclamation mark? When do you do an ellipses? When do you do a hyphen? Some of that's nuanced, and it's harder to do in a multiple choice exam with like an online class, I guess, because anyway, it's just gonna be hard to integrate my grammar instruction into the online sphere, and I've been trying to figure that out for a while now. So
I love a 5-minute video that you like too. you force their hand to watch it. There's all kinds of ways in Canvas you can ensure, and I like to do a check, but like just like a 5-minute, like really short. Students overwhelmingly will watch a 5-minute video. Like, especially like I like to, like, you have your cat, and like I like to be silly in my videos because I'm often recording them at 1 o'clock in the morning by myself in my living room.
Insomnia is a good motivator. It really is.
Yeah. So, and I hear that the library has really cool recording area that we can use these days if we're looking for recording access. So you don't have a good setup at home.
We can certainly help you with that. We don't have a specific area at the moment, but come talk to us and we'll work something out for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I know that we're not as shiny as like a university library system where they have like a for instance, UNR has like a whole recording booth, like professional AV equipment and stuff. That's like really quite nice. I know that not every library can have that though. It's like a whole.
So here's what I say. I say we prove the need and give Ron the documentation that he needs for the funding to get us a booth. And I bet Ron would get us a booth if we could prove we'd use it.
Overwhelm me with requests, please.
Okay.
I will happily, because you know what I've wanted to do for years? I've wanted to do like a WNC faculty podcast where we just like 2 faculty members just get together from different disciplines and just talk about random stuff that they both enjoy. And I think that like students and other faculty would just enjoy that. Like I just want to talk about stuff like Tom Herring, talk to me about just the stuff that makes, you guys want to see something really fun? Ask Scott about golden ratios. It's his favorite math thing. And if you ask him about golden ratios, he gets so excited about them. And he just like, it's fantastic. I want to have a podcast where faculty just ask each other those questions and we can just like go off on our favorite niche thing. iHeartRadio, here we go.
Jerry, that sounds fantastic. I think that, yeah, make that happen. Yeah, this discussion of like reading is like really good because I think the biggest thing I learned these last 2 semesters going into summer here is that I'm pretty good at teaching writing and I'm really bad at teaching reading. It's just like I have no, and I think it's because reading's really easy for me and writing's not. Writing's hard. And so I understand the difficulty, but I just read and it's like I have my notation and I know how to read. I know how to shift my, perspective. If I'm reading a science article on exercise science and periodization, I know how to shift it for literature. And so I have really failed at scaffolding reading for students in a way that helps them.
Okay, so
That's
this
something I wanna
semester
work on.
I rolled out Perusall. I tried it out. I think I've mentioned it before. It's an annotation site where students can engage with annotations with each other. So it's like global annotations. And I haven't tried out the Canvas version of annotations, partly because I think it's like an isolated thing, like only students can do that. But the problem with Perusall is that I allowed students to do different modalities. So they could either do their own personal annotations on things on paper, independent, or they could do that and like take a picture and upload it so I could see that they've done it, or they could do the Perusall option. And a lot of students who chose the Perusall option did like it because they could answer each other's questions. The problem is that I didn't, because I wasn't doing it with Perusall. They have like this sort of thing where they're like, it has to be a higher quality annotation, like it has to be of merit. And I didn't really want that. I was like, you can just ask a basic question, because I was doing poetry. And that's whenever you can just have a reaction like, what the hell is happening here? And I would allow that as an annotation. I thought that was valuable. But Perusall doesn't really like that. So it didn't really give me anything in the way of data that probably Jerry's looking for in that respect, of like number crunching of like who was doing what. But it seemed valuable for the students who wanted to do it. And for students who never annotated, they just never did. So it didn't matter. But the annotations were, I think, a helpful tool for teaching poetry at the bare minimum. And I think they complained about it, but I know that it was a valuable thing, because I think I saw more of it going forward with reading, like They Say, I Say, and then now Frankenstein. So Perusall seemed to be good for my 102 class. I don't know if that would work for you and trying to set that up and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be useful and such. But I like, my thing is like even more, I think part of it's just my approach to reading. Part of it is like because I'm just like, I almost treat reading like, oh, do the reading and we're going to talk about it, and I don't bring the same level of like intentionality to the reading that I do to writing, of like this, like, we're going to practice this. And so I never teach it as a practice. I never show myself doing it I show them when I write. And I think that's probably a big part of it, because it's like something where, again, a lot of my readings are really short. And well, just an example is I had them read the essay How Apples Go Bad by Helen Rosner, which is a kind of a, if you've read it, it's sort of a satirical, well, not satirical, but it's a metaphor. It's like a metaphor on, police corruption and police brutality. And they would only take away, they read the last line, which is about burning the whole branch. And they say, either they don't get that it's about law enforcement, which is, to me, I was like, how do you not get those about law enforcement? And they read the last line and they're like, okay, that's what it means. And I think I think part of it is just my approach. I just sort of like go into it expecting them to be able to understand the connection between sentence 2 and sentence 47 and know that those play with each other and that this is a nuanced thing. So this is all really useful because, like, yeah, Jerry, I think that's kind of one of the things I've been thinking is like, I'm going to read more in class because I think that'll help. And they like it when I get dramatic, but yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff to try, but I think a lot of it too is just my intentionality. Yeah. So
I know Angie has some great ideas as well. If you would like, I would love to talk to you about. So I teach reading as a process the same way that I teach writing as a process, and I actually have assignments to like build around that. So like the in-class reading is one part, and then we complete, and mine is built off of SQ3R, And if you ever wanted to like, it's very user friendly. I don't teach it as SQ3R, but like that's what I'm doing because I do teach SQ3R in college in strategies for success. So if you ever wanted to like explore that a little bit, because I am the same way. I am from a family of readers. For the longest time, I thought like reading was just a natural thing that everyone sat down and did, and that we were all doing it the exact same way. And it wasn't until I was teaching that I was like, oh, nope, I read differently. And the fact that I read Jane Eyre when I was 12 means I feel differently about Victorian text than do other people. And also maybe my parents should have monitored what I was reading a little more closely. Like I look back, I'm like, really, Mom? 12? You really think those are the lessons I should be learning at 12? But you know, so
I want to cut in here because I always have comments, but there's a whole conspiracy thing happening with like literacy and what is happening in like early elementary reading instruction. And there's this really interesting podcast called Sold a Story, and it's all about how phonics instruction was getting rolled back, and there's lots of different political reasons for that. However, I'm on both sides of it, because it's like, I do agree that phonics instruction needs to be happening at lower levels versus like this 3 cueing system that was rolled out and other stuff that was happening. It's been happening for about 20 years now. But whenever we see those high schoolers coming through, they were part of that 3 cueing process of first, understanding to read. But students or not students, just people, some will just always read, like they'll figure it out. They don't need more like direct instruction, versus there are times in which they do need more direct instruction. You never know who that's going to be, really. And that's the problem, it seems like. But that's like a holistic problem. And I can't say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but it's always like, there's so many levels to this problem. And it's not even just what, Curtis, you're seeing of like not knowing how to teach reading. It could be just because you're just naturally, your brain was hardwired for it almost, it seems like, or you just picked it up, like what Jerry was talking about, versus there needed to be some sort of direct instruction, whether through like phonics or other sort of means and things like that.
There's some really interesting, there's some really interesting neurological research on this. Because like based on like, so my 3-dimensional imagination skills are like non-existent.
Yes,
the world inside my head is flat. And I really struggle with that, but I'm very, very good at reading and then applying that or translating that or understanding just from reading, right? I'm great with theory for that, which is, whatever. My husband is an exceptional 3-dimensional thinker. He's a mechanic. He's awesome. If your car ever breaks down, let me know. I'll tell you where to go. He's an exceptional 3-dimensional thinker. And he has dyslexia. And there is some research that actually is suggesting that many dyslexics actually have exceptional 3-dimensional thinking, and that is like, it is not just random. It is not just by chance that there's something there. And so you may have people who have undiagnosed dyslexia or undiagnosed just challenges with reading that they don't even know that they have necessarily, because if you're smart and you're, say, in a sort of stressed school district, they may never catch that you have challenges with reading because you're smart enough to get around them. And then they get to us, right? And I just want to say, we don't have English majors in our classes, right? We have people who are getting an associate in welding who still have to take Composition 1. We have, our nursing students who need to know how to understand what they're reading and how to communicate via writing. But so many, I think there's such a wide variety in our student base that it gives us such a wonderful opportunity to help those students.
I think you've got some really good points there about that question of dyslexia that goes undiagnosed. But I wonder also if there's an issue where reading simply is not valued. It is simply not seen as a skill that is worthy of investment of time. And I think that sometimes is a really difficult obstacle to overcome.
I think different kinds of reading aren't valued. I think like in the same way that different kinds of writing aren't valued. So like the pithy comment in writing is absolutely valued because of the way that it translates. And in the same way, like the ability to read something short and kind of gather the cultural nuance, I think that is still valued. But I think you're right. I think that more in-depth, sort of traditionally academic perspective on reading isn't valued. It's more of like, it's almost like they're really great at 6-word stories, and we need them to be great at novels. And the two, like, they're related skills, but they're not the same skill. Does that make sense?
I had a student say that his best source of information was from memes. So, the little short pictures, the little, so that was a little terrifying.
And, well, it is, because the sociological concept of meme is that it is an idea that takes on a life of its own, and that is horrifying if that is the source.
I think that, I mean, part of me is like, well, so my big project, like, and again, I've talked before about how I'm kind of a hippie, so I'm just going to continue that vein. That's who I am now. But it's like, when I came to reading and like really came to it, it was like, you find a piece of reading and it can change your life. And I think, Ron, this is maybe to your point that like, students are never told that they could open up this essay or this book and like, you could read something in here that'll change your life. And it's like, and I want to impress that on them because that's super cool. And I don't think they realize how cool that is and like how exciting that is. And I think, like that, it's just like, this is huge. This is amazing. Like, do you know what the book you're holding in your hand right now, you know what it could do to you? But you could leave today and be totally different. I'm getting a little spiritual here or whatever. But I mean, that's kind of the point, is that it's like, these words can do something to them. And I want to express that to them. And I'm trying to, figure out a way to do that. And,
Okay, right now, I would like everyone to share a piece of writing that did that for them. I will start. Donna Haraway, Cyborg Manifesto, changed my life. Changed how I view my entire world. Okay, who's next? Who's got one?
Tom Robbins, another roadside attraction. But to jump into just something super, super positive, the newest generation coming up is loving books. They are going nuts. There's a whole thing called Book Talk that they're doing on TikTok, which I'm not on, but people send them to me all the time. And so we might see a different trend coming.
Yeah, well, it's trendy to be in love with books. It's that aesthetic almost, but they do follow through on it. Like, also kids are like freaking out over chess. Like, they just love chess. For whatever reason.
A very weird article about that. Now, Katie has opened her mic, so she's going to tell us a piece of writing that changed her life.
Yes. Okay. So okay. So middle school, I knew how to read. I was really good at reading, and I just couldn't ever finish a book. And then I saw Phantom of the Opera, like the movie, the 2004 movie. That changed my life. And then in 7th grade, I read Phantom of the Opera in 3 days, which was a big deal at the time. Like, I could not finish a book for the life of me, but I finished Phantom of the Opera in 3 days. And that just started me to actually read. And the first time I read Twilight, for instance, in middle school, I didn't like it because I read enough where I was like, no, I'm not really into this. And I actually put it down like 3 times before I fell back into it. And but Phantom of the Opera was the one that kicked off everything for me. And and now I've read it a couple more times, of course. Actually, I've read it more than a couple of times. But it's so funny because I'm able to kind of reevaluate it whenever I reach a certain age, and it's just good.
Yeah, rereading Jane Eyre wasn't brilliant for me. Ron, what do you got?
Oh, well, so there are 2 levels. The first one was I actually discovered reading when I was a relatively old child coming to reading, and there was a book called Biggles and the Camel Squadron by Captain W.E. Johns, and it was the typical sort of boy's story. He wrote series after series of these adventure stories. And for the first time, I came across a book that I just got lost in and never stopped reading after that. But the one that completely blew my mind was If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italo Calvino. that just took my understanding of reading to an entirely different level. And I still go back to that and just luxuriate in it.
I love that, luxuriate. All right, who's next? Who's next? Curtis, you started us off. Off you go. Oh, Josh opened his mic.
You know, mine's I Love To Kill a Mockingbird. It was one that I read when I was a kid, really young, and I probably read it 200 times. I don't know. It was always something I read before I went to sleep. For whatever reason, I like the character so much. Yeah, I don't have anything brilliant to say about it, but it just oddly stuck with me. And it was interesting, you always think like, what you don't read literature, it reads you. And when you read something when you're really, really young, and we didn't have TV when I was growing up. My dad murdered the the television, shot it. So that's all we had. And so I to read something so many times at different stages of your life, it's fascinating to see it, and because you're seeing yourself in different ways. So that's pretty cool.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah, my adult one was actually, and I don't know how into Russian literature I'd be now, but Anna Karenina I actually really loved, like reading one summer. And then as a kid, I was really into that book, into a lot of different books, but The Phantom Tollbooth, do you remember that one? I think they made a movie out of it or something. I always remember that one being pretty cool. And
all right, Curtis, you're up. Phantom
Yeah,
Tollbooth, I haven't thought about that in years.
all these great literature picks. I'm more of like a nonfiction person, but I mean, I think Emerson got me into reading, like self-reliance. But I mean, I'd say The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's just like, I read it when I knew, around the time when I was like thinking like maybe I want to do a teaching thing. And I read that and I was like, yeah, things need to change. I really, always come back to it though.
All right, Claire, take us home.
All right, I have my copy of it right here. This is Larry Levis Elegy. When I went to get my MFA in creative writing, I applied in fiction and poetry. And actually USC accepted me in fiction, but Fresno State only liked my poetry. And I ended up going to Fresno State because it was a lot cheaper than USC. And I went down there and I was a total fraud as a poet because I had never met a poet that I liked yet, really, that really got under my skin. And this guy, Larry Levis, had just passed away when I started the program. And they did a memorial reading of this book, which was published posthumously after he died. And a little redundant there, but when I heard this book read, I was like, holy crap, poetry can do that? I didn't know poetry could do that. It just got like under my skin, and yeah, I've like read everything this guy has written, and he's, I think part of it's because he grew up kind of in a similar environment to me and kind of had similar background, and just kind of, yeah. Then I was no longer pretending to like poetry just so I could be an MFA in poetry.
Thank you all so much for sharing. That makes me want to go read things. And I might say, if we share some of this stuff with our students, maybe make them want to read stuff too. Just putting it out there, maybe. I know that students, even if they aren't interested, they are, and I always tell students, like, even if you're not interested in the subject, if you find out that it is the professor's like area of interest, take that class, because their enthusiasm and passion for their subject will be contagious, and you will have an enjoyable learning and educational experience. Which is why, like, students let me babble at them about science fiction. They don't care, but they still like to hear me babble about it. So So we have fun. Well, thank you all so much for sharing that. I really enjoyed that.
I tried having students read some Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And then one student afterward at the end of class was like, can I write about teachers assigning like critical race theory for my research paper? And it's always interesting because I had a friend who was like, oh, my students love it and we have this great discussion. And then I'm like, okay, I'll try this, and then work out.
We live in a weird time because I also had a student who wrote on the course observations that they felt that the inclusion of, it's like Ariana Grande in the OER textbook, they used her as an example of how she communicates in social media. And they
wait,
said
was
that,
it Selena Gomez?
Oh yeah,
because I use that one too, and I always get mixed reactions.
And somebody put in their course observation that the textbook was pushing like a feminist agenda on students because it included that specific example. And I'm like, so the existence of a young woman in a public forum is enough. So I agree, Mary. It's challenging because sometimes they take away not the thing you wanted them to take away. And also that person doesn't understand.
I get around that. Oh, the way I get around that with that OER text, is it writing guide? Yeah, because that one has the Selena Gomez, I think, bit. The way I get around it is that I offer extra supplemental readings so they get to choose. So if they were the ones that chose Selena Gomez, it's on them. So they were curious but that's sad because I want us all to read the same thing and have the same reference point. And so I don't know, it's a struggle. But with the online sphere where I'm not able to like really direct conversations the same way, I just have a couple more options for them to choose for text and things like that. So
like, I'm okay with them pushing back against the textbook, but I want more than on a course observation. I didn't like it. Like, I want to know, like, okay, please identify for me the points that you felt that this was propaganda. You use that term. Propaganda is a word that has a meaning. Tell me what the definition is. Show me the example. Like, I'm totally okay with engaging that conversation, but I hate this sort of passive, like, I didn't like it, and so I'm going to bitch at you anonymously in your course observations. Like, I don't have a lot of patience for that. I like that at least your student, Mary, wanted to like write a paper about it. They did completely miss the point and also misunderstand what critical race theory is. But at least they wanted to engage.
Well, and everything has an agenda. Like even a scientific question, when a scientist asks a question, you're focused or obsessed with a particular aspect of reality that you're testing and your hypothesis and all of that. So it's not, you can't expect to go through life without having an agenda pushed at you. You just want to use your critical thinking faculties to be an independent thinker and be able to take that in, consider what you agree with, what you don't agree with. It's like, get confidence, so you're not feeling pushed around by everything.
Yeah, it's the P on the crap test. Purpose. Everybody's got a purpose. Everybody's got bias. The only dangerous bias is the one we refuse to acknowledge. Okay, well, Jess is somewhere really anxious because we're not focused on it. She's like, I can feel like Jerry's allowed them to just talk about random stuff. No, we're talking about awesome stuff this morning. I'm having so much fun with you guys this Friday morning. Let's see, are there any of our sort of ongoing discussions anybody would like to touch on? Anything that we're thinking about as we're headed towards the end of spring? Anything? Oh, Claire.
I was just going to throw one thing out there. I am an advocate of using Turnitin, which I know Curtis is not so fond of. But they did just add the AI detector in there. And so far, I haven't seen it detect any AI writing from my students, which is good. But that is plugged in there. And I just use Turnitin as a plugin for Canvas. And so that's one way to do it. I also fed one of my assignments into ChatGPT just to see how well ChatGPT would write my advertising paper. and it did actually a pretty good job. I was like, oh, this is a little terrifying. It actually wrote a pretty good, 4-page essay on a specific advertisement, but the advertisement was kind of vague. It wasn't very specific. And so one of my requirements is that the students have to submit either a URL for the online version of the ad, or they have to actually put it in their appendix for their paper, that the actual copy of the ad. And it also didn't work with sources and quotes properly. So
I agree.
things that-
Sorry, Nicole just made a comment about the false positives. I agree. I wanted to test out the more on my end. I wanted to do a true like anti-control where I was like, had a ChatGPT paper and then submit it through Turnitin and see how it flags things, or vice versa, do something that I personally wrote and see what happens with it. Because I know that it's really just flagging for well-structured sentences usually.
Yeah, like I highlighted a few sentences that showed up as AI, and then another website said it was human generated. So
I'm dealing with something right now. I seem to always monopolize these conversations, but I have a student and they're a Jumpstart student, and within their Jumpstart program, they have Chromebooks, and with them, those Chromebooks, they have automatic, like their administration. Okay, I'm just going to call it out. It's Oasis. Oasis, they have automatic, their administrators have automatic access to the doc history. So I'm dealing with a situation right now with a student who their writing tutor realized they were using ChatGPT, and they had fed it through a couple detector sites, and it said, yes, I did the same thing with the same text, and it kind of was inconclusive. But to me, what seemed to be the smoking gun, so to speak, was actually the doc history, to see that something was written very quickly. It's not even that it was necessarily the text itself, the quality of it, it was how quickly it was done. And that to me for right now, I think is the best way to have some sort of detection. However, I didn't have access to the doc history. I had to contact Oasis and their personnel to say, like, what's the doc history on the student's work? And that's a good way to kind of do that. But that's not always the case for all these situations. You could also just retype it if you're going to be somebody who's going to be very sly, but a lot of teenagers are not going to do that. Again, I'm dealing with a lot of teenagers, so they're doing teenager stuff, hence these things. But that's to me right now what I've been doing. So
yeah, so thank you, Nicole, for bringing that up. I also read an article that a different AI detector was tested blindly and didn't perform very well. So we are still sort of the best the best arbiters of that. And I don't know, I'm still just not sure really how to manage this technological advance. I've been pretty fortunate in that my current students who are Gen Pop English 100 students have not been engaging that tool. And I can tell that mostly because I would expect the tool to be a little more cohesive than some of the writing that I'm getting, and I have really specific but I mean, you know, we're all going to run into it at some point. I know I'm going to run into it at some point, and I'm just I am not sure how to engage this particular beast as yet. So I appreciate everyone sharing their experiences as we continue to navigate this. I always check Turnitin though. I don't trust Turnitin for anything. Like, no, that's a quote, you idiot. There are quotation marks around it. It's a quote. And it's
there
like,
should be a way to take that out, but I don't know. I still like it because for me personally, dealing with the Oasis crowd, a lot of the students will try to turn in other students' work. And I say a lot, that's happened 5 times to me.
Oh.
And so it's great for that.
Or people that are engaged to get married. I had that happen once where the guy borrowed his, soon to be wife's paper, and they were very, he changed it up a little bit, but it was very similar. So, I think Turnitin is it depends on how you use it. But if you use it and you actually check the report, like you get usually if I get a 30% match or higher, I'll just look in the report to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes even the ones that are close to 50% it's just someone who put a ton of quotes in there.
Yeah.
And they might not have enough of their own original argument in the paper, but they're not cheating, they're just putting a ton of outside
Yeah.
sources in there. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
I sort of just use Turnitin as like a filter.
exactly.
through which I like, it's a specific lens through which I look at the paper. So like click it open and exactly, Claire, like sometimes it's just they have a lot of quotes. Sometimes it's like, oh, they're in somebody else's class, right? And they try to submit the same paper in multiple places, and you're like, hey, I know Professor Gillespie. I think I'll email her and ask about this paper. So, yeah, I think, yeah, we just have to use the tools we have and be good critical thinkers and show our students. That might be a fun demonstration for a student, right? Put a test one through Turnitin and be like, so here's what I look at when you like, here's what your report would look like, and here's what assuming, right, Curtis, we're not pressuring you to use Turnitin. You have to make your own decisions. That's academic freedom. That's your choice. And you bring up very good ethical concerns that I'm choosing to kind of ignore a little bit because it makes my life complicated.
Fair enough, I suppose. Yeah. Just be aware of our students' privacy. That's all I'll say.
Yes. No, it's a really good point. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that doc history thing that I just brought up is like super dystopian, but it was something I was already integrated with in the public school sphere. By having the Chromebooks, they're automatically signing away any privacy they have, really. Their keystrokes are logged, and they'll still do stuff that they shouldn't be doing.
well, and the way I look at an academic paper, like the final draft that they turn into, is that it is a public document that you're submitting to the academy, to an academic audience. So I think an expectation of privacy in that sense, like even in the classroom, you're sharing your writing with other students. So I think any expectation of privacy at a certain degree when you're submitting like a final product for an audience is a little bit problematic, because that's not the point of the writing at that point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The thing that gives me pause is that Turnitin keeps all of these essays, and that's how it works. And students are not consenting to have their work kept in what's essentially an archive that automatically associates their work with plagiarism. Even if they didn't plagiarize, that archive is a plagiarism archive. It's an archive that necessarily associates their work with plagiarism. And I mean, so that's kind of where I get a little bit iffy about it. And I also get uncomfortable when I feel like, I don't know, if I feel like it devalues the process. I'm getting too philosophical. Whatever. I just feel like it devalues the writing process, and it devalues my teaching to run it through. And this is me. I'm not making an argument about anybody else. This is just me personally. I feel like it devalues my teaching, because what am I saying to myself if I'm going to run their stuff through this? If I can't, and maybe this is unfair, I think there's great arguments against it, but if I can't catch that they're plagiarizing, shame on me. If I can't get them to not plagiarize, shame on me. And I think the cheating will catch up to them eventually. And if it doesn't, then what was the point of catching them for cheating anyway? I don't know. That might be a terrible argument. It probably is a terrible argument. There's all kinds of things in here. I'm gonna stop.
That's okay. That's okay. This is a good place to have those kinds of conversations.
And I would just add that I think it's good to be like, to question, that kind of consolidation of information in a single company's archive. And I think if that didn't make everybody a little uncomfortable on some level, I think that would be problematic. But yeah, I mean, I've used it for so long. And initially I did have students that were nervous or worried about it, but it doesn't seem to come up. And I do, in my syllabus, even I mentioned that it pretty much all gets submitted to that. And I've submitted my own papers to it just to see how it would treat them. And usually if the only person that actually sees like the students identifying information with it would be the instructor that had the paper turned into them. And then if you get a match in the database, you can contact the institution. So it does kind of protect, it has a layer of protection. But again, a hacker could get, all kinds of things could happen to take away some of that. So it's worth being cautious about or thinking about, I think.
And to be fair, I have a tinfoil hat on about the whole privacy thing. Like, I don't look at when students log into Canvas. I think that personally, I think that's wrong. I don't think I need to know how long they spend on Canvas and how long they spend on assignments and when they've last logged in, unless it's an online course in the very first week. That's the only time I ever look at it. But
I will point another time, if you are awarding an F, that information is exceptionally useful, because then you can actually pinpoint the last time that the student was in Canvas, which is the only time I use that feature, by the way, is
But
when
then I
I'm,
always wonder about that because I'll have a student who like stopped turning something in the second week, but then they'll log in like week 15, but they don't complete anything. So I still
Yeah,
put there,
no.
no, you didn't attend. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes for me, I'm mostly like looking at that, that right around that border, that mid-October or that mid-March date, just to make sure that I'm not at the unearned F thing, which I don't understand. They earned that F. They walked away. That was absolutely an earned F. I disagree with the definition of it as an unearned F. Like, I'm sorry, administration, I disagree with how you've defined that thing. But yeah, you're right, Mary. It's just one of the ways that we can kind of check on participation and if they're actually showing up and doing stuff. Because I also have I have people who show up the whole time and then just don't turn stuff in. Like, they keep logging in, they keep showing up to class and they just don't turn stuff in. Like, but that's okay. That's also an earned F. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, let's see. I'm looking at our ongoing discussions. OER, anything we want to talk about with OER? We touched on OER a little bit.
I actually wanted to, I know that we already moved on past the assessment thing, but I messaged you, Jerry, regarding my experience as a reader. And I was just curious, did you determine any sort of answer for that? I probably could have emailed you, I suppose, but I was just wondering if we want to have a conversation about I don't know, assignment prompts or just what we want as for 101 or 102 in terms of just, I don't know, research papers. Cause I don't know, for me personally, it was interesting, but reading a batch of papers that were just kind of very similar, I suppose. And even though I wasn't necessarily too concerned of it being like a plagiarism problem, because initially whenever I emailed, for context, I read a batch of papers, everybody, and 4 of them were very identical in their overall argumentation. And so I was just surprised by that. And initially I was like, wow, that's very specific. But then I was eventually like, okay, maybe it was just the assignment prompt and the nature of it. And I'm just curious as, what do we want to determine on that end?
So one, I will always talk about assessment, but
sorry.
it just 24 hours a day. Just let me know when you want to talk assessment. So the example that Katie is bringing up were these 4 essays, and I was able to determine that they were all from the same instructor. And I looked at them and I agree with Katie. I think it was just a super specific assignment prompt. And so it brought up an interesting question, because the prompt was so specific that it ended up in 4 basically identical papers, 4 identical arguments, essentially, because it felt very much as if the thesis had basically been provided. And it was so directed that I know in my class, I wouldn't necessarily feel like that had met the objective. Because in my class, you have to come up with your own thesis, because that's an important part of critical thinking and writing and writing a research paper and all that good stuff. And so we have talked previously about coming up with a template, coming up with some more specific guidelines for that piece of writing that we are going to be collecting for assessment. And I would love to keep having that conversation. There's a lot of hesitation around a universal prompt. I'm open to that discussion as well, but I know that there's feelings about it, and I'm not pushing for a universal prompt. but I do think that it was a good example, and this wasn't an adjunct group of papers, and it was a good example of how our discussions as full-time faculty and the way that we inform each other's teaching, because you guys are all in my head when I'm teaching, talking to me about all this good stuff, and you guys and your opinions and your perspectives absolutely inform my teaching. That, we need, we should, maybe we need to work at helping encourage adjuncts into this conversation outside of these meetings, and that some universal language in a template, or some required language in a template might help that if adjuncts aren't able to participate in these meetings or in these conversations the way that we hope that they can. So yeah, I would love to talk. It was so specific. It was so specific. It was a really interesting prompt, and I could tell that the students were like interested by the argument, but it did have that quality of like, they are interested in the subject, but I don't feel like this is their subject. And so it's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, and I like that idea of, partly because I saw it wasn't like philosophy, it was like an argument that teachers should maybe provide a bank of like thesis statements for students to kind of choose from. And I've heard of that before, and this was kind of a great example of that. As Jerry pointed out, it's like it was just like I said, very specific, but it led to some interesting stuff. I mean, I don't know. So there could be an argument for having kind of a set sort of boundary of these types of things to choose from, which technically speaking, we were kind of talking about the 298 class. 298. And I have to say, my experience taking the 298 at UNR was very much like that, where there was a bank of thesis statements and we had to choose from them, and we had to make that argument happen. And I felt like that was very juvenile whenever I was doing it. But anyway, it was just, so reading that batch of papers kind of took me back to that moment, and I was just like, oh, what is happening here? But yeah, I think Jerry working backwards and saying like, it was probably just a directed prompt that kind of went in that direction, and it led to that sort of thing. But it could be interesting because it seemed like a themed class that I would have been interested in taking. I don't know. Yeah.
But we see this other places. I mean, we had an adjunct faculty member for years who required that their final research paper be on capital punishment, which also directs the thesis one of two ways.
Yeah.
Either you are in favor of capital punishment, or there are only two arguments that can be made. And I like, at the time, like I would push back against that as well, because I feel like, at least in my class, students really love that I let them research whatever they want. And that is really challenging. It's challenging for them. It's challenging for me. And every year I'm like, oh my God, I should limit the topics. And every year I choose not to, because I believe in the power of choice for my students. But other thoughts, guys? What do we think? Are there any elements that you're like, you know what, a research paper just has to have this? Or
I like having a theme. Like I did my 101 this time. They have to go out and find a conspiracy theory that's false and debunk it. And I give them a list of different ones they could possibly use. But I say, if you have one that you're interested in exploring that you're pretty sure is a false conspiracy, then you can tell me ahead of time and you can write about that. So yeah, it's kind of like trying to build on some of the readings and critical thinking in the class that I've kind of guided them through, and we'll see how it goes this time. It's a new one for me. So
I like that idea, because I wanted to make a longer sort of theme of misinformation, disinformation, and information literacy, really, which is, we've been talking about this for a very long time at this point with these meetings. But yeah, having that like an explicit sort of thing, like in that respect, I think that's a cool idea.
My only concern with that is people would be like, the conspiracy that the COVID vaccine will help you, you know.
I specifically told them, don't write about COVID.
Okay.
I said there are conspiracy theories about it, but right now the science is still new. And so
Okay.
even if you're going to take a very scientific objective view, whether it started in the lab or started, there's stuff like that. We just don't know the answers to the questions. So it's a bad one. I said, well, if you go back to the 2016 Pizzagate, that pizza joint that got shot up because of the,
Oh, right.
supposedly it was a sex trafficking ring,
Trafficking
or
ring,
the
yeah.
like Wayfair furniture, or I do like Pakal's, the Mayan coffin lid, the sarcophagus lid, and that Von Daniken uses as evidence that ancient aliens existed. I was like, well, that's small enough for a shorter paper. You could look into that and look into Von Daniken's arguments and debunk it with the actual evidence about the sarcophagus lid. So that would work. So I try to give them stuff that's old enough that, the moon landing was fake. That would be one possibly too.
See, that was always one of the things that I loved about the library presentation on sources, is that they have that great that timeline of like what comes out when, and like how academic stuff takes so long to come out. And so I use that as a guideline for my students too. I'm like, this is really recent, so you're gonna have to you're only gonna have these kinds of sources, and you're gonna how are you gonna bring in academic sources if it's not, that's a very conspiracy theory. But I don't know, I think even themed, I think there are still some commonalities there in the paper that's being produced that we could outline more specifically to help. Oh, thanks so much, Josh. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
So I don't know, I would love to keep having the conversation, and maybe we can all kind of identify different pieces that we think are really valuable to make sure that they're all included. And we have those great course standards as well. We updated our course outlines, and those are all looking really beautiful. I think it would be wonderful if we looked at those course standards, and if they need any updates, or if we can look at new ways to sort of make sure that new faculty or existing faculty, hey, let's send it out to all the English faculty. Hey guys, here's some paperwork, just in case. And maybe we could use those to help come up with some universal things for a research paper template that we could also share with faculty that I think could be really useful. And I think also there's material on there and on our research paper rubric that we could kind of use to come up with a rubric or update our existing rubric, and share that out as well. I don't know your guys' experience of using the assessment rubric this time, but I really loved the nuance that we got from doing that. And it was a little complicated when I was breaking everything down, but I felt like we got so much insight into what was happening in these areas and in these classes with this subject of information literacy. And those were areas that I was like, wow, we could lift that out and put it into a rubric in Canvas, and I could just use this in Canvas, and that could be my rubric, and I could just use this for my papers for this area, and that would be actually really nice. And so I would love to keep doing that with the different areas, and sort of take that wonderful work that Claire and Ryan did those many years ago, and build on it and get these materials shared widely.
How many people have continued to do literature for English 102?
So I include literature in my 102. It's one of my sections. So I have literature writing, history writing, and science writing. So the class is broken into three sections now. And so literature is one of them, which has been really fun. I'm not teaching it. My course was built for the co-teaching, and the students are loving the choose your own adventure nature of getting to pick, I want to read about this and I want to read about that. And it was the most fun to come up with the literature collections because I'm like, everything. I want them to read everything.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah,
Curtis,
I
are you doing literature
I mean, the closest, not really, the closest I have to literature is the Helen Rosner piece. I have a little bit of science, some history, and then a lot of, I don't like break it out into sections. It's just kind of like every other week is a different kind of genre type thing. And it's pretty loosely defined, but then I try to target the essays so that, you know, they can write a little bit more personally, they can write a little bit more objectively. I just try to give them a balance, I guess. In my next 102, I want to more clearly kind of the categories. I feel like I just didn't do it as well, and that's all part of my trying to get better at teaching reading. But I don't do a lot of literature now,
Okay.
and it's mostly just because I've never had the chance to teach it before. So
Right. Oh, okay.
yeah, so coming
And
into
Claire, are you? Because you're pretty.
yeah, coming into the 102, I was just like, well, I'm going to stick with a lot of stuff I already know how to do.
Okay.
I would like to incorporate more literature.
Yeah,
I
it
would
can be
want to teach,
fun.
but yeah, I would like to incorporate more.
Yeah, I added some literary nonfiction to my literature class, and they kind of liked that, so it's cool.
Well, I'm keenly aware of how many Jumpstart students I have at the Poly campus. And so I do know that I'm kind of taking their like they're basically their senior year English oftentimes. And I know that I shouldn't really take that into consideration, but for me, I was like, I need to still have texts in a literature sense that they would have probably gotten in a high school setting that they're just not getting because they're with me. And so that was kind of what directed the selection of texts that I chose. And I kind of ended up with just a giant survey of literature at the end of it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm happy with it, and partly because I moved quickly through it. So then by the end, we have more time to just talk about other sort of things that are not text specific, that are larger sort of things. So sorry, there's a link.
Yeah, I will say from an assessment perspective, I'm pretty excited to see the essays from this spring. And like specifically next spring, because a lot of us, it's our first time making adjustments or, you know, trying out some new stuff. And so it's kind of hard to see. The first year data is kind of just like, look, we did a thing. And then we'll get some good information. Next year, Curtis, I will say the first time I teach any class is kind of a mess. And it doesn't matter what that class is. It can be any class, like literally I teach a genre fiction class, which is what like my advanced studies were in. And the first time I taught it, it was a mess. So you're in good company. Don't worry. The first time we teach it is always kind of like that. The first time I taught English 102, I did in fact have students read a full Victorian novel. Yeah, Wilkie Collins' The Moonstone. I don't know what I was thinking. I ran into an old student like from that class who was like, "Are you still torturing students with?" I was like, "No, you guys convinced me not to. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was very young and dumb. I'm sorry." Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate it. This is a place where we can be ourselves. Oh, that's right.
That's the novel I forced my 102 students to read. It's very disturbing, but
yeah. So, but there's lots of great stuff. And I'm sure, Curtis, if you were interested, we would all send you very long lists. I myself have a list of like open access, so stuff that you can have for free online. And my stuff is like, it's really depressing mostly, but I think it really is. I discovered when I was teaching in person, I'm like, oh look, death, good, more death. When you're like, oh look, Faulkner is light, that's really, you got to start questioning yourself. When Faulkner is one of the light readings in your course, that's not a good sign. So lots of death. All right, amazing. Well, we've got about 20 minutes. Anything else we want to touch on? I just realized that I recorded this wrong. So the link is going to be the wrong kind of link, guys. Sorry. It's going to be a link to a YouTube instead of a link to the WNC Zoom. I didn't even know I could record it wrong. See, I'm learning new things today.
Did you record it locally to your computer instead of to the cloud? I used to do that all the time until I figured out, oh, it's much easier with the cloud to do it.
I am, and I'm going to put on my tin hat. I am deeply distrustful of clouds. Deeply distrustful of clouds. And so my default is always, no, I don't want that. And then I looked at the links that Jess puts up. I'm like, nope, I did want that. This was a time when it would have been fine. And I didn't need to have my conspiracy. That's okay. We'll still get it. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be fine.
I'm right there with you, Jerry. It's okay.
I'm totally fine with clouds. So I use the cloud all the time. I only use the cloud. I use 4 different clouds.
That is hilarious. Okay, yeah.
My stepdad is a security guy for IT. Like he runs Sierra Nevada Corporation, and he was there whenever he's still there. They're transitioning over into cloud usage, and from his perspective, it's a nightmare. So, but they're a military contractor, so they are held to higher security standards.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm nothing if not a hypocrite, so I'm going to use the cloud.
You're not a hypocrite. You're complex. You're a collection
Thank you,
of
Jerry. I'm
paradoxes.
complex. You're right.
Yeah, we're all just a collection of paradoxes. This is just one of yours. That's totally fine. All right. Well, we've got, let's see. Our ongoing stuff, actually, we've kind of all hit on sort of just in the organic nature of this lovely conversation that we've had today. We've talked about faculty support. We've supported each other with strategies for reading education, and we've talked about AI and all the good stuff. We did all the things. Is there anything? Yeah, Claire.
I was just going to mention that they're doing the Mark Twain days this weekend, and they have a couple of writing workshops that they're being taught by some pretty good people. I put flyers up around campus. I actually got in trouble with someone at the library because I brought them flyers, and she's like, "Nope, you have to take these by the information desk first." I'm like,
yeah.
Oh my God, I got in trouble. But I put them out myself anyway. I was being rebellious. I was like, I've been here for like 20 years. I'm going to do it myself. So they're all over. Yeah, so it looked kind of fun. They're like, I think McLavoy Lane, however you say his name, the Mark Twain impersonator, is doing a little thing, and they have like a little dinner. I don't know. I'm hopeful it'll turn out well for him.
I love a good Mark Twain impersonator. Fun. So many quotable lines from Twain, right? Like, good one.
Wife and I were just talking about Mark Twain because I'm from Illinois, and so we talk about Mark Twain all the time over there. And I didn't know enough about Mark Twain, and then I find out he actually has stuff going on over here too, and I'm like, no, that's my thing. I'm from that's our stuff, but no, it's not. He's an American hero, truly. He belongs to us all.
You said we're in Illinois, and I'm like, wow, they talk about Mark Twain in Nevada and Illinois. That's amazing.
No, I'm the original. Illinois is not.
Have you guys all been to his little cabin over by Angels Camp or wherever it is?
Yes, Red Roughing It. Yes.
Supposedly he wrote Notorious Jumping Frog. I don't know if he started it in that cabin or.
Well, I read his really bad play because it got finished. It was discovered in a desk somewhere. I think it was either in Davis, I think, and they finished it and they published it, and it was just a very bad play. It was just
really not
bad.
Good.
It's not good.
It's not good. I was gonna produce it one year for a local community.
Oh no.
Theater. And I was like, so the first thing I need to do is edit the crap out of it. And I got halfway through. I have a copy in my office, and it's caked with notes of what is this? And I backed out. I was like, I'm sorry, I can't. It's too bad. It's a really, really unfortunate play.
Jerry, if you put it on exactly how it's written, I will pay $50 for a ticket and watch it.
You know, the
I would
folks
love
at the
to see
Brewery Art Center are really good sports. I bet they would go for it. Oh, for our faculty podcast, we could do a dramatic reading of it. Ron, we have to have a podcast studio. We're gonna flood you with requests now.
Okay, so let me just be clear. I wasn't sure. I wasn't clear that you were looking for a podcast studio. The student government has a podcast studio ready to go.
Okay, so what Ron is saying is that by next fall, I need to get the faculty podcast going. That's what I'm hearing. So that's my takeaway. Excellent. So we need to push you for video recording. Fabulous. Now we know what to push for. We can be very specific. Because
We need to be
to-
sponsored by Blue Apron and Squarespace and
the mattress people.
and yes, the mattress people, like all of them.
We'll get all of those to sponsor us.
Yeah.
That would be fun. Hey, pre-tenure people, you want to put something on your portfolio? Great.
If you want a fun podcast to check out, by the way, I definitely recommend Dead Eyes,
Okay.
which is about an actor who got fired by Tom Hanks. And that's the whole focus of the show, is how it like changed the trajectory of his life. And the last episode, he actually gets Tom Hanks on the show with him, which is
Of
pretty
course he does.
amazing.
Of course he does. He probably
It's-
lured him there with a typewriter.
Oh, it's so good.
That's good. Yeah. If you're looking for fun this afternoon, you can listen to How Did This Get Made, which is a comedy podcast about very, very bad movies, and it is very, very good. Would recommend. Okay.
What's it called again?
How Did This Get Made?
Oh, okay.
And it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
I like
I-
a podcast called Scam Goddess, and she'll talk about
Yes.
scams, and she's just really funny. Do you listen to her too?
Yes, she's amazing.
Yeah, she cracks
Oh, I love the Scam Goddess.
me
She
up.
respects a good scam, and I respect that. That's capitalism at its finest.
Mhm.
All right, folks. Anything else? Anything else we want to touch on? Anything else we want to share? Anything we're excited about? The end of the semester. We're at the end of week 4, people. Or week 12. We're almost there. Almost there. You'll be getting annoying emails from me about your assessment artifacts again soon. It's that season already. Okay. Well, then I will give you back this 15 minutes of your morning. Thank you all so much. Thank you for tolerating my deeply questionable moderating of this meeting. And I appreciate also your grace with my questionable notes. In advance, I appreciate your grace with my questionable notes. Yes, special thanks to Katie's cat. I just discovered that my puppy is 65 pounds. I can't get him over here to show you guys. Nope, can't get him here. Do love a kitty. I know Mary's cat wasn't here today. I do love Mary's kitty.
I'm standing up, but she's passed out in the bed.
Good girl, smart cat. Cats really are life goals, aren't they? Oh, Curtis, big
Aw.
orange cat. Oh, I love a big orange cat.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love a big orange cat.
He's my good beefy boy.
He is a
Yeah.
good beefy boy.
He's real
Oh.
beefy. Got him in North Dakota. He's got that Nordic Viking blood in him.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what? That's good for his first winter here. He needed that. He's better prepared than most of our Nevada cats were. Certainly, my daughter's cat was not prepared for this. He's just been inside for many months, like looking out, like, why? Why is he doing this?
There's a trope that orange cats are especially dumb. Is that true for your cat, Curtis?
I don't know that I can endorse the stereotype, but it is true
Okay.
specifically for my cat. Yeah, my
Okay,
cat
got
is
it.
specifically dumb. Yeah, I don't know if it's true of all orange cats, but
Got it. Okay.
My roommate's big orange cat when I was in college was also kind of an idiot. He would fall off things a lot. You know
2
how
data
cats
points
are
right there.
supposed to, you know how cats are supposed to land on their feet? This cat didn't have that. So he would just like, just kind of fall off of
We had a
me.
cat like that too when I was a little kid. It was Mac. His name was Mac, and he was an orange cat, and he would get up on the roof and fall off, and it's like, what in the world?
Okay, we are collecting interesting data points about orange cats here.
So it is confirmed all orange cats
think
are.
so.
Okay,
I think
we've
so.
confirmed
We've
it. All right.
confirmed it. We've confirmed it. All right. On that note, I will leave you all. Thank you all so much for your time. Oh, to round us out. Oh, that's a good kitty. Thank you all so much for your time. Ron and Nicole, thank you so much for being here. And I personally am super excited to be working with the library about information literacy.
Me too. Thanks.
Thank you guys.
Bye, guys.